So welcome everyone. So this is a talk in the crypto session. It's actually mostly about verified software security, but it has a little bit of crypto flavor as well. So let's see. So when we think about parsers, so first of all, we need to format messages. So we have a set of high-level messages, V, and we have serialization that transforms that into a sequence of bytes. And the parser is going to either map that back to a message in V or to a parsing error. So when we think about what we want to verify about parsers, the first thing that comes to mind is parser correctness, which is probably the most useful property that you want in order for your application to work. So you want, for any given message, that if you parse the message that you have serialized, you get back the same message. So that's an important property, and we definitely want to verify it. So the first comment here is that in order to get correctness, you need to have injective serializers. And you can see it as a very straightforward application of functional correctness. So if you have two serializations that are equal, then you apply the parser, and you get that the two messages are equal. And here you may already be wondering what kind of crazy formats would actually have messages that have different serializations. So it actually turned out that in TLS, you have some messages that are ambiguous, that actually can be parsed in two different ways. So this was actually used successfully to do an attack by Mavroginopoulos. And this is based on the fact that the key exchange message in TLS, it doesn't have a tag. So it can either be, depending on what you RSA or ECDH or DH, it has to be parsed in different ways, but there is no tag that tells you in the message which one it is. So basically, the server can actually sign an ECDH message, but you can also parse it as a DH exchange. And then, of course, prime will be completely bogus and very easy to do discrete logon. So interestingly, we thought that, so this was in TLS 1.2, and you would have maybe thought that the lesson was learned for TLS 1.3, but in fact, it actually turned out that in 1.3 there is the same problem in the certificate message. So that's something that we missed during the standardization. But the certificate message, so in TLS you can either send the X509 certificate or just a public key. And there is no tag to tell you which one it is, which means that maybe you can find some crazy certificate that actually interprets as a broken public key. The good news is that because the protocol is better designed, you don't actually have a concrete attack, because in TLS 1.2 you only sign the Diffie-Hellman share and the nonces, but in TLS 1.3 you sign everything. So this gets us into this idea that when you're looking at cryptographic protocol or applications where you want to authenticate the messages that you are sending, correctness is not a sufficient property for your security. So an example of that is you could have parsers that are not exact, and by that I mean that you could actually parse successfully something that is not in the range of your serializer. So let me give you an example of that. So this kind of error is actually quite a bit more difficult to detect, because your usual functional tests will not actually catch that, and it's more something that you would catch by doing fuzzing. So there is a very good example of this problem, and it's a very famous attack. So this is Bleichenbacher signature forgery on PKCS1 v1.5 padding. So in the PKCS1, the way that you sign a message, so first you hash it, and then you format it into a very, very simple ASN1 data structure, which essentially contains the identifier of the hash algorithm and the hash. So it doesn't really get any simpler than that. It's just a pair. And it's interesting. So the way that, so after you have formatted your pair, you actually add the padding, and you do the modular exponentiation. And when you want to verify the signature, you unpad, you parse, and you check the digest. So what Bleichenbacher realized is that in PGP, so this is back in the end of the 90s, so back in PGP, what PGP does is that after it actually parses the ASN1, it's considered that the thing is complete, and it ignores the byte that appears after the digest. So this is actually pretty bad, because the security of PKCS1 signature relies on the padding. And in that case, we have actually eaten all of the padding with junk bytes. And if you lose a low exponent, it's actually very, very easy to forge values with most significant bits are anything you want. You just do essentially modular cubic root, for instance. And this was known for a very long time, but what is really interesting is that over the years, there have been like 5 or 6 different ways to screw this up. So an example is this attack that I reported on the NSS a few years ago. So this is an overflow in the length parser, and similarly, it lets you inject arbitrary random bytes in the middle of your ASN1 payload. And as I said, what is really surprising is that the same attack appears maybe a dozen times, and it's really incredible that people have found a dozen ways to screw up the parsing of pairs. So the beauty of that is a very, very nice attack because it gives you universal signature forgery, so you can forge arbitrary certificate, arbitrary signature, you can sign bad codes. It's a very powerful attack. So the lesson of that is that if you care about authenticating the messages that you want to process, you need to have exact parsers. So the pre-image of the valid messages by your parser is exactly equal to the image of your serializer. So then you have this more subtle class of attacks, which is about malleability. So what if you have multiple representations of the same message? So this is actually a more subtle problem, but it has actually appeared also in practice. So I think one of the most interesting recent examples of this is in the Bitcoin, where this is actually a very, very famous class of attack. So in Bitcoin, what you do is you hash transactions, which is this very complicated data format, which contains some signatures and some public keys and ASN1 payloads, so a lot of stuff goes there. So what is really interesting is that what you signed, so you actually hash more information than what you sign. So what this means is that it's given a transaction, you can actually, because the parsers in Bitcoins are malleable, you can actually construct another transaction just by changing a little bit the format that will still be valid and semantically equivalent to the original one, but it will have a different hash. And the problem with that is that many Bitcoin users actually identify transaction by the transaction ID, which is a hash. And they don't actually expect that an adversary is able to change the hash of the transaction, but the transaction remains valid. So, this was one of the big blame on the attacks against the Mt. Gox exchange a few years ago. And the forensic evaluation of the blockchain has actually shown that this attack was used thousands of times. And it's actually quite difficult to fix. So the moral of the story here is when you are dealing with applications where you rely on message authentication, you need actually these two properties. And that's kind of a general principle because cryptography stops at the level of bytes. So your hash function, your signatures, everything is going to give you authentication of your bytes, but your application actually cares about what you parse, so which is why you have this parser problem. And you have actually very few formats that are secure by default. So ASN1 distinguished encoding rules is one that is secure, but nobody wants to use it because of all of this screw up like in PKCS1. So what we propose, so one last thing is, so developers, they don't actually write parsers themselves. So writing parsers is very, very boring, and it's much easier if you use some tool to automate that process. But the problem is that it's not always possible, and one of the reasons people actually write custom parsers is for performance reason, and another reason is because they may actually need secure parsers, for which you don't actually have widespread tools. So for performance, the most efficient way that you can actually deal with message formats is to use a zero-copy format. So you want to actually use the network representation or the serialized data representation as your memory representation, so that you never need to do any copy. So when you start to do stuff like that, then you get into much increased risk of memory safety. And that's because the parsers are your most exposed interface to the adversary. So they are on the front line of your application, so they are directly exposed to adversarial inputs. And it's very vexing for security researchers like me that we spent a lot of time looking at TLS protocol, for instance, that compared to attacks like Heartbleed, which is a memory safety problem, this has a much, much greater impact. So for all of these reasons, we started working on this EverParse framework, which is a set of tools that are used to prove these three important properties of parsers. So we care about the functional correctness, we care about parsing security, and we care about memory safety and performance, obviously. So for that, we define, so our main verification language is called FStar, and we define the very classical parser combinators so that we can actually compose them. So a parser takes some bytes as inputs, and for the type T, it will return either none, which is parsing error, or it will return some V of type T, and tell you how many bytes of the input have been consumed. And you can see that the serializer here encodes the functional correctness property. So it's well known that this defines the monadic structure, so you can actually compose parsers using a bind construction and the sec construction. So if you have a parser for type T and a parser for type T prime, you can get a parser for the pair. So let's see how this plays into our architecture. So LowParse is this library of combinator, and it actually has three flavors of every combinator. So the first flavor is the specification level one. So it's used to specify the message formats, and that's the one on which we actually do the parsing security proof. Then we have two different implementations. So we have a functional implementation, and it is proved to be correct with respect to the specification combinator. But we also have a low-level implementation, which is also correct, but unlike this other one, this is an implementation that can be extracted to a zero-copy C code. And for this one, we have to additionally prove memory safety. So using this framework, you can either use, if you write an application, so you can either use the verified FStar or LowStar interface using the correctness guarantee and the parsing security proof for your security analysis. Or if you want to write a native application, you can extract using the Kremlin compiler and use directly the extracted C interface in your native application. So of course, we don't want people to write manually combination of combinators in FStar because that's very difficult. So one of the big value of our system is that we provide a fully automated toolchain. So what we expect is that users of EverParse only have to write a data schema description in our DSL, and we have an untrusted tool that is going to compile that into the formal spec and the two different implementations. And all of this is fully automated. So then there is a question of how do you know that your so that your DLSL spec that you wrote is correct? And for that, you can rely on interoperability testing. So if you can actually check that you can talk to other implementation of your format that validates that that your specification is correct. So what is important here is whatever is produced by Kwakidoki, as long as it verifies in FStar, then we guarantee that the parsers that we generate are correct, safe, and secure. So maybe they are not standard compliant, but that's something that you need to check by interop testing. Okay, so the kind of formats we support, so we have a bunch of integer representation, Little Endian, Big Endian. Some of them are specialized for Bitcoin and for ASN1 and for Quick, so we have several flavors. So we have some fixed-sized arrays. We have some variable length lists. We also have, so they can either be prefixed in number of elements or in bytes. We have structs for concatenation, and we have tagged unions as a dependent type. We also have enums. And when we write a tagged union, the tag has to be an enum. So in terms of the LowStar implementation, so what we generate is this LowStar code that is parametric in a parser, so it's a higher order style. And it takes an array of bytes and a starting position, and so it does not, so this is on the reading side, so it does not do anything, so it requires as a precondition that the input buffer is live. And as a postcondition, it returns either some error code, which tells you that the spec parser returns none, or it returns some postcondition that says that there exists a high-level spec value such that it parses to this value. So you may be wondering, how do we actually extract that to C? because all of this is combinator style, which means that we use higher order functions everywhere for the composition of parsers. And the answer to that is we rely very aggressively on specialization and inlining. So every time that you use things like monadic compositions, we actually inline the code of the parsers and create some first order C code. So as an example of a real format, so on the left, we have written a full spec of the Bitcoin block format. So a Bitcoin blocks, it contains, as you can see, version, Merkle root, timestamp, nonce, and it contains a list of transactions. So each transaction has a list of inputs and a list of outputs, and each input has previous hash, next hash, it has a script, etc. So this is the input to our Quackadeki tool, and when you call that tool chain, what you get is these extracted C functions. So for every type, for every struct, you get a validator that is going to check that your input is well-formed with respect to that structure. And you also get a bunch of accessors if you want to navigate the struct. So of course, the reason we invested so much effort in this toolchain is because we have an application in mind, and our main application is Everest, where we try to actually verify the TLS protocol and the quick transport. So what we did is we actually ported every TLS types, and we wrote a full specification of it in Everparse. So this is important because in terms of line of code, parsing is actually quite a large part of MidTLS code base, and it's even a larger part of the extracted C code. And it's also difficult to write by hand, and in the previous version of MidTLS, it was a source of inefficiency because we did a lot of heap allocations to do parsing. And we want to do that in zero copy style to be a lot more performant. So through this effort, we actually found a lot of bugs in the TLS message specification. So some of them are the one like these untagged unions. Some of them are actually interesting, like for heartbleeds. So heartbleed is blamed as an implementation bug, but it actually is also caused by a very, very bad spec. And we have other examples. So to conclude with an evaluation, so as you can see, for TLS, we have 315 data types, and this is expressed as 1,600 lines of Quackadeki input code. And we produce 70,000 lines of F-star. It takes about 45 minutes to verify, half an hour to extract, and you get back about 200 lines of C code. So we have similar applications for Bitcoin and PKCS. So this shows that we can scale to real-world formats and complex message like TLS. And lastly, so the performance, so I'm not giving all of the details, this is a paper for that. But since we are zero copy and we are all inlined, we are very, very fast. For instance, we can actually parse a Bitcoin core 10 times faster than the Bitcoin deserialization function, even though this comparison is not completely fair because they are one copy and we are zero copy, which means that there is some overhead that we have to account for our accessors. When you actually use accessor, unlike one copy parsers where you amortize access when you do random access, we have some overhead every time we use accessors. Okay, so just a word on proof engineering. So we had a lot of problems scaling our proof, and we rely on normalization and tactics, and we have some reference to that in the paper. So to conclude, the main takeaway are that we are the first parser generation tools to generate both zero copy and secure parsers. We generate automated proofs of correctness, security, and safety. And our code is highly performant and usable in the native applications. And the last point is, even if you don't care about our implementation, it's a very useful tool suite because you can actually analyze your message formats to make sure that it is not ambiguous or that it is actually secure. And that's useful for standardization, even if you don't care about our implementation. So everything is open source, and I encourage you to check out our GitHub page, and we even produce Docker image if you actually want to try the tool yourself without having to build everything. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, so any questions? I don't want to jump in, but I don't know if this is a question, but I'm a little horrified that this is 2019 and we have a lot of code out there, high performance code that is doing, I assume, zero copy parsing, and it's not formally verified.
Yeah.
Can you tell me if I'm just misunderstanding that? Is
Yes,
that accurate?
so that is an absolutely true statement. So what is really horrifying is that there is, so in general, you have pretty good formats for helping you write parsers. So you have stuff like protobuf, flat buffers, CBOR. You have a very big choice. The problem is that none of them actually are usable in the cryptographic settings because none of them produce secure parsers. And that is really the gap that you're trying to fill with this tool. So here, with using this toolchain, you can actually get not only parsers that are secure, but we have a formal proof that these parsers are secure, which is much, much better, obviously.
All right, thank you. Another round of applause.